Hi, I'm Susie, one of the many Stewart children, and I'm going to introduce part 4 of the book we're reading called Love Stories. From an early age, Mom encouraged me to read. She took all of us kids to the neighborhood bookmobile every week during the summer. I brought home as many books as they allowed, and I was extremely proud to own a library card. I wanted to get the certificate for reading 25 books over the summer, and I'm pretty sure I earned one every year. Mom never told me I couldn't read a particular book, and that's because she believed that any kind of reading was good for the mind. She always gave books as gifts to her grandchildren. If you've read or listened to any of her stories, you know Mom was a believer in and a reader of banned books. Maybe I knew writing was in my blood from birth because I graduated from college with degrees in journalism and communications. When I moved away from home and Mom began intensively focusing on her writing, she would ask me to read something she had written and critique it. I couldn't believe how intriguing and well-written her work was. I was also impressed that she joined a writers group to hone her skills. I knew some of the writers in her group, and I knew that they were published authors with books for sale at local bookstores. What an amazing peer group to critique and perfect your work. I thought of my mom as, well, my mom. She cooked and cleaned and took care of things around the house. It wasn't until she was gone that I was able to delve deeply into her life through the writings that we compiled for her books, My Name is Fiona and Love Stories. I learned that throughout her life, she observed the interesting qualities that make each person unique and used her literary skill to tell their stories. She found beauty in the everyday people, places, and situations she encountered. My mom loved the world deeply, and that love is reflected in the writings you'll find in this book. In Chapter 4, you'll hear about her fellow writers and why it was almost impossible for her to define one favorite book. She wrote a beautiful tribute to autumn called Octovember. The story I love most is titled Lost on the Way to Paradise, where you'll discover her sense of humor and creative ability to weave a story from multiple perspectives. Part 4, Writing. Fellow South Carolina Writers Workshop Members. Something exciting happens at the open bookstore in Greenville on the first Thursday of each month. The Greenville chapter of the South Carolina Writers Workshop meets there for 3 hours. I am sure you wouldn't find a better way to spend 3 hours at such a nominal price. I came to the Greenville Writers Workshop as a novice at reading my work aloud and getting real feedback from real writers. I had been in another group that seemed to spend more time eating cookies and drinking soft drinks than listening and critiquing. Not only do the writers at the open book listen to the words I read, but they write on the copies I provide. If that isn't enough, 2 of those folks around the table write up a synopsis of the work I read and publish it in the monthly newsletter. From this group, I get instant verbal feedback, written comments on my stories, and another published critique. From these sources, I have come to guard my first Thursdays so I can attend the meeting. When I came to my first meeting, I was somewhat overwhelmed by the quality of work I heard. Randy read from his upcoming novel about his Vietnam War years. Sue intrigued me with Harriet, the ShopRite spy, a budding writer who solves a mystery. John introduced me to Mason Pig, whose first adventure was a revision of The 3 Little Pigs. Nancy gave the group her uplifting readings for the inspirational market. Poetry is not my strong point, but Gene always brought new insight with his poetry. I admire him for his being able to combine baseball and poetry and actually sell that to Sports Illustrated for children. Steve's novel took me to the world of Genghis Khan. Russ was the heavyweight intellectual of the group, doing field research on dinosaurs in South Carolina and blowing our vocabulary minds with technical terms we had to look up. Robin wrote inspirational essays to help soccer moms cope with their busy lives. Last summer, pranksters Chris and Pat manufactured a story about Pat Conroy having visited the group. A few actually bit. Newcomer Leland wrote of events he observed at the Governor's School for the Arts. As the years went on, I agreed to write critiques for the newsletter. This proved to be a work of love and an avenue for growth. Getting out a column on a deadline is an exercise in frustration and a feeling of accomplishment. When Phil, the editor of the newsletter, went out to find a new editor, he twisted my arm. With his help, I got out the first one and struggled each month to do it all over again. I do thank him for forcing me to find an easier program to do newsletters, the Print Shop Press Writer. Doing a monthly mailing has stretched my learning curve. It hasn't been easy, but together, PW and I put the newsletter out each month. Phil had to make more time for his real writing work. He has a definite fixation on rock and roll, especially Elvis Presley. I've sat through Elvis in Space, Elvis in a hippie van, Elvis and the hippies buying bananas, peanut butter and mayonnaise in a grocery store for his favorite snack. None of these characters recognize Elvis because he is now a mall Santa. Phil has promised that his next installation is a steamy love scene with Judy Parker, the hot chick he met at her Aunt Judy's mall craft store. Phil is a study in trivia and attention to detail. He has researched some 400 Elvis fan clubs and knows more about the rock scene than anyone I know. Sorry, Phil, that may not strike you as a compliment. Hearing new trivia from Phil about Elvis's twin, who died at birth, got me psyched up to write about the twin. Seems the twin was named Jesse, and I have a mild fixation on a character from my hometown, Jesse James. Thanks, Phil, for inspiring me to make a connection between Jesse James and the later-born Jesse Presley, a long-lost relative of the outlaw Jesse. Being a participant in South Carolina Writers' Workshop meetings has expanded my world, both the real world and the world of writing. If we charged admission and presented a program called The Best of the South Carolina Writers' Workshop, the intellectuals of Greenville would pay upwards of $30 a seat at the Peace Center. If they were booked, we could go to Coffee Underground and get $10 apiece. But for your annual membership of $50 a year, you can come to the open bookstore and meet these characters every month. Well, I don't know about you, but here in the South, the seasons are finally beginning to change from summer to fall, with the cooler temperatures and lovely oranges, yellows, and reds of the leaves changing color. Pat had a favorite month she called Octovember, and in next week's story, she describes her feelings associated with this time of year. Find out how much she loved the fall next week.